The village of Nyamba lay nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, a place where traditions had been followed for generations. Life here moved with the rhythm of the land. The rains came, the crops grew, the river flowed, and the people thrived. But something had changed. The once fertile soil had turned dry, and the river, which had always been the village's lifeline, was now a thin, murky stream. The elders whispered of a curse, a punishment from the spirits for a sin no one could name. Livestock fell sick without explanation, children woke from nightmares, and a sense of dread settled over the people like a heavy fog. The village elders, keepers of ancient wisdom, gathered under the sacred baobab tree, where countless decisions had been made in the past. Their conclusion was clear: the spirits were displeased, and the only way to restore balance was through an ancient ritual, a sacrificial marriage. A young woman of pure heart and strong spirit must be wed, not to a man of her choosing, but to whomever the spirits willed. Zalira had heard the murmurs long before her name was spoken. She was not just another girl in the village. She was different. She had a way of seeing beyond the ordinary, of feeling things that others could not. Some called her gifted, others whispered that she was cursed. She had lost her mother at birth, raised by a father who loved her but was often distant, lost in his grief. When he remarried, Zalira's place in her own home had become uncertain. Her stepmother tolerated her presence, but never hid the resentment in her eyes. When the elders finally announced the chosen bride, no one was surprised. It was Zalira. She was to be married at the next full moon, under the watchful gaze of the ancestors. Her husband. No one would say his name. Fear and uncertainty gripped her heart. Who was this man? Why had the spirits chosen her? The answers would come, but only when it was too late to turn back. Zalira had never known the warmth of a mother's embrace. Her mother had died the night she was born, leaving her in the care of her father, Maliki, a respected hunter in the village. He had loved her in his own way, but his grief had made him distant. For years, it had been just the two of them, until one day, Maliki remarried. Her stepmother, Naima, was a woman of sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue. At first, she had treated Zalira with indifference, but as the years passed, that indifference turned to resentment. Zalira was a reminder of a woman Naima could never replace, a burden that took up space in her home. The girl was too strong-willed, too curious, too unlike the obedient daughters Naima would have preferred. Zalira, however, did not let the coldness of her stepmother weigh her down. She learned to navigate her life between the shadows of the household, finding solace in the wild, running barefoot through the forests, whispering secrets to the wind. But no amount of freedom could shield her from what was coming. When the village elders declared that a pure-hearted girl must be chosen for the spirits, Naima saw an opportunity. She knew the villagers whispered of Zalira's strange connection to unseen forces. The girl was different, too different, and in Naima's mind, that meant she would be the perfect offering. Without hesitation, Naima stepped forward. "Zalira is the one," she announced before Malachi could object. Zalira was not consulted. When she was finally told of her fate, Naima softened her words with lies. "You are lucky, child. You will be married to a distant but hard-working man. He may be poor, but he will take care of you. This is a chance for you to start a new life." Malachi, torn between love and duty, said nothing. His silence was an approval in itself. Zalira had no choice but to accept. She did not cry, nor did she argue. Deep down, she knew that her fate had been sealed long before she was even given a say. The night of the wedding arrived with an unsettling stillness. The air was thick with the scent of burning herbs, the smoke curling into the dark sky like silent prayers to unseen forces. The ceremony was not held in the village, as was tradition, but deep within the forest, where the spirits were said to be strongest. The villagers did not question this change. They only obeyed. Zalira walked through the trees, guided by the flickering light of oil lamps held by the elders. Her heart pounded with every step. She had not met her husband-to-be, only heard his name spoken in hushed tones. Jeno, a man no one seemed to know much about. As they reached a small clearing, Zalira saw him standing in the shadows. Jeno was tall, his frame lean but strong, his posture rigid, as if he carried a weight too great for his shoulders. His face was half hidden beneath the hood of his cloak, but his eyes, dark, deep, haunting, bore into hers with an intensity that made her shiver. The elders wasted no time. The ceremony was brief, the words spoken in a rhythmic chant. Zalira and Jeno stood side by side, hands bound together with braided vines. The elder poured water over their clasped hands, murmuring an ancient blessing. "You are bound now and forever," the elder declared. As soon as the final word was spoken, the wind howled through the clearing, lifting the dust and leaves into a wild dance. The flames of the oil lamps flickered violently, nearly going out. Zalira turned toward Jeno, but he was no longer there. Gasps rippled through the small gathering. He had vanished into the air as if he had never existed. Zalira staggered back, her breath caught in her throat. The elders did not panic. Instead, they exchanged knowing looks, their expressions unreadable. "The spirits have taken him," one of them said solemnly. "His home is yours now." Zalira turned to them in disbelief. "What do you mean? Where is my husband?" "He will return, if the spirits allow it." No further explanation was given. The villagers turned away, leaving Zalira alone in the heart of the forest, in front of a small, shadowed hut that now belonged to her. The night whispered around her, and for the first time, Zalira felt truly abandoned. Zalira stood before the hut, its wooden walls worn by time and weather. The thatched roof sagged slightly, yet something about it felt untouched, as if it had been waiting for her arrival. She hesitated before stepping inside. The moment her foot crossed the threshold, a chill ran through her body, and the air inside shifted, thick with something unseen. The hut was empty, yet strangely alive. A single mat lay in the corner. A clay pot sat near the cold hearth, and dried herbs hung from the rafters, their scent unfamiliar. The space should have felt abandoned, but it didn't. Something lingered here, watching, waiting. As night fell, Zalira curled up on the mat, exhaustion weighing on her limbs. The silence was deafening. Then, just as sleep began to take her, she heard it. A whisper. Her breath caught in her throat. It was a man's voice, low, distant, yet unmistakable. "You should not have come." Zalira shot up, her eyes scanning the room. There was no one. She pressed herself against the wall, heart pounding. The voice had been close, as if someone had been right beside her, but she was alone. The next night she heard it again. This time, the whispers came not from one voice, but many. Some soft, some urgent, some speaking in languages she did not know. They moved through the walls, over the roof, under the floorboards. Yet she never saw anyone. The hut itself seemed to change with each passing night. Some evenings, it was warm and welcoming, the air rich with the scent of burning wood and fresh earth. Other nights, it was cold and lifeless, the walls stretching into endless darkness, the very air thick with dread. By the fourth night, Zalira no longer waited for the whispers. She expected them. And then, just before dawn, the voice came again. "I am here." This time, she felt a breath against her ear. She turned sharply, but there was still no one there. The night was thicker than any before, the darkness pressing against the hut like an unseen force. Zalira sat upright, her breath shallow, waiting. She had grown used to the whispers, the shifting shadows, the unseen presence of her vanished husband. But this night felt different. The air inside the hut rippled, like water disturbed by an unseen hand. Then the shadows moved, From the dim corners of the room, figures began to take shape. Tall, elegant beings cloaked in flowing garments, their eyes glowing like embers. Their forms flickered, like candlelight dancing in the wind, neither fully solid nor completely transparent. Zalira's body froze, but something deep inside her whispered, "Do not be afraid." One of them stepped forward, her voice like rustling leaves. "Child of fate, you must listen." Zalira swallowed hard. "Who are you?" "We are the keepers of the land, the watchers of fate, and you. You are bound to a man who walks between two worlds." A chill ran through Zalira's spine. "Jeno." The spirits continued, their voices weaving together like a song. Jeno had once been a great warrior, a man of unmatched skill and unbreakable will. But he had defied the gods. He was given a choice, one spirit whispered. Obey or be forgotten. But Jeno had refused to bend. He fought against fate, believing he could carve his own path. For his defiance he was cursed, to wander the space between the living and the dead, never belonging to either. Zalira's hands trembled. "Then why did you bind me to him? Why was I chosen?" The spirit's eyes flickered with something close to sorrow. "Because only you can set him free." She shook her head. "How?" They did not answer right away. The wind outside howled, rattling the thin walls of the hut. Finally, the first spirit spoke again. "You must find the truth that was buried and face the gods themselves." The room suddenly plunged into silence. The spirits faded like mist at dawn, their presence lingering only in the chill left behind. Zalira sat alone, her heartbeat a wild drum in her chest. She had come to this hut as a bride to a man she had never known. But now, she realized, she had been brought here not as a wife, but as a savior. The night after the spirits revealed the truth, Zalira felt the weight of fate pressing against her chest. There was no time to question, no time to resist. If she wanted to free Jeno, she had to face the trials laid before her. At dawn, a voice called her outside. It was neither human nor spirit, yet it echoed in her bones. She followed it into the misty forest, her feet moving as if led by unseen hands. The trees whispered around her, guiding her deeper until she reached the river's edge. The water was dark and still, but its silence was deceptive. Beneath the surface, shadows twisted and turned, reaching, waiting. A spirit emerged from the mist, its face hidden beneath a hood of woven reeds. "To cross, you must not fear," it said, "but the dead will try to claim you." Zalira stepped forward, the cold water biting at her skin. The moment she waded deeper, hands, cold, lifeless hands, rose from below, wrapping around her legs, pulling, gripping. Panic surged, but she fought it down. The spirits of the river fed on fear. If she gave in, she would never make it across. She pushed forward, her breath ragged, her muscles burning. The hands tightened. Whispers filled her ears, voices of the lost, calling her name. She clenched her fists, forcing herself forward. One step, another, another. Then, just as suddenly as they had grabbed her, the hands released. Zalira stumbled onto the far shore, gasping, soaked, but alive. The first trial was over. The second came at sunset. A great fire roared in the center of the village ruins, its flames blue and gold. Another spirit awaited her, this one wreathed in smoke. "To move forward, you must burn away what holds you back," it said. "Step into the flames." Zalira hesitated. The heat was intense, the fire alive, flickering, as if waiting for her decision. She thought of her fears, of the life she had left behind, of the doubts that clawed at her heart. Then, without another thought, she stepped forward. Fire licked at her skin, but it did not burn. Instead, it wrapped around her like a second soul, crackling, whispering, reshaping her from the inside. She screamed, not in pain, but in release. When she emerged, the night air was cool against her skin. She felt lighter, changed. The final trial came at midnight. The spirits led her to an ancient burial ground, where the air was thick with memories. A third spirit stood before her, its form shifting between male and female, young and old. To free him, you must face yourself, it said. Zalira's heart pounded as the mist before her swirled, revealing an image. It was her, but not as she knew herself. This Zalira was not afraid, not uncertain. This Zalira knew who she was. She stepped forward, locking eyes with her own reflection. The moment she embraced it, the world around her shattered like glass. The trials were over. But the real test had just begun. The village had changed since Zalira's departure. The air was thick with rumors, whispers traveling from hut to hut, like wind through dry grass. People spoke of strange happenings in the forest, of spirits that walked in the night, of a girl who had vanished but was not truly gone. In the heart of the village, Zalira's stepmother, Nefari, sat inside her hut, her fingers tightening around a wooden bracelet, a trinket she had once stolen from Zalira's mother. Her eyes burned with rage. Zalira was supposed to be gone, erased from her life, sacrificed to fate like a lamb led to slaughter. But she had heard the whispers. Zalira had survived. And worse, she might return with power. The thought sent a sharp wave of fear through Nefari's chest. She had spent years ensuring that Zalira remained weak, unwanted. If she returned stronger, if she learned the truth, Nefari's place in the village would be ruined. She could not allow it. That night, she sought out the village chief, a man whose loyalty could be bought with the right price. She found him seated outside his hut, sipping from a clay cup of palm wine. His eyes narrowed as she approached, but when she held out a small pouch of gold rings, trinkets she had hoarded over the years, his interest sharpened. "You have always been a man of wisdom," Nefari said smoothly, "a protector of this village." The chief leaned forward, running his fingers over the pouch. "What is it you want, Nefari?" She forced a look of grief onto her face. "Zalira is still alive." The chief frowned. "She was given to the spirits. It is no concern of ours." Nefari's hands trembled, not with fear, but with practiced sorrow. "You don't understand. She has defied fate. If she returns, the spirits may turn against us all. We will suffer." She leaned in closer, her voice a whisper. "But if we act now, we can prevent disaster." The chief studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. By morning, hunters were sent into the forest. Warriors with sharp spears and sharper instincts. Men who had hunted lions. Men who would not hesitate to spill blood. Their orders were clear. Zalira must not return. And so, they vanished into the trees, searching for the girl who had been given away, the girl who should have never survived. The hunt had begun. The air around Zalira shimmered, a veil between two worlds stretching thin. She had passed the trials, but one final task remained. The spirits led her to an ancient clearing, where the ground was neither earth nor sky. The world around her pulsed, shadows twisted into light, the air heavy with something beyond time. This was the border between the living and the dead, the place where Jeno was trapped. A voice, deep and aching, echoed through the space. "Why have you come?" She turned and saw him. Jeno. But not the quiet man from their wedding night. This Jeno was different. His form flickered like a dying flame, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow with endless sorrow. Chains of light wrapped around his wrists and ankles, binding him in place. Zalira took a step closer. "I came to free you." He laughed, but there was no joy in it. "You cannot free me. I am bound by my own choices." She could feel the weight of his pain, the years of wandering, the regret that clung to him like a second skin. The gods had punished him, but it was his guilt that held him here. A spirit emerged from the void, its voice like the wind through leaves. "You have reached the end, child of fate. You have one final choice." Zalira's breath caught in her throat. The spirit continued. You may stay here forever, bound to him in this world between worlds. She felt her heartbeat slow. Stay? Here? The thought of leaving the world of the living sent a shiver through her. Or, the spirit whispered, you may return. But Jeno will be lost to the spirit world forever. Zalira turned back to Jeno, searching his face. His sorrow was raw, but beneath it, she saw something else, a flicker of hope. She reached out and placed her hand over his. I will not leave you. Jeno's chains trembled. She closed her eyes, letting the warmth of his presence wash over her. It was not the gods who decided his fate. It was him. And if he could not forgive himself, she would show him how. She whispered the words she had learned in the fire trial, the ones meant to cleanse a soul. You are not lost. You are not forgotten. You are not alone. The air crackled. The chains shattered. Jeno gasped as the weight of centuries lifted from his spirit. His form became solid. His eyes filled with something long lost, life. The spirit world trembled. A path back to the land of the living opened before them, glowing with golden light. Zalira turned to Jeno, holding out her hand. Come home. For the first time, he smiled, and together they stepped forward. As Zalira and Jeno stepped through the veil between worlds, a rush of air engulfed them, pulling them back into the land of the living. Zalira gasped as her feet touched solid ground once more. The forest around her was eerily silent, the weight of the spirit world still lingering on her skin. Jeno stood beside her, no longer a flickering shadow, but a man whole and alive. His dark eyes met hers, filled with gratitude and something deeper, a quiet understanding that their fates were forever entwined. But there was no time to rejoice. Before Zalira could take another breath, a rustle in the trees made her freeze. Shadows moved swiftly, circling them. The hunters. Her stepmother had not wasted time. A spear flew through the air, aimed at her heart. Zalira didn't flinch. Before the weapon could reach her, it stopped mid-air, trembling as if caught by unseen hands. A force, neither wind nor man, rippled around her. Zalira's fingers tingled as she realized. It was her. The hunters hesitated, fear flashing in their eyes. One of them, the leader, stepped forward, gripping his spear tightly. You should not have returned, he spat. The spirits took you. You belong to them now. Zalira lifted her chin, feeling the power thrumming beneath her skin. The spirits did not take me. They sent me back. The hunter snarled. We have orders to end this. Another warrior lunged, his blade gleaming in the moonlight. Zalira raised her hand, and the world shifted. The ground beneath them trembled, not violently, but with a pulse, a rhythm that carried the whispers of the spirits. The air grew thick, and the warriors stumbled back, visions flashing before their eyes, echoes of their ancestors, of spirits watching them, of hands reaching from beyond. None of them could move. Zalira stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. The spirits do not wish for blood to be spilled tonight. The leader's hands trembled. He looked at his men, who were now whispering among themselves, their eyes wide with uncertainty. One by one, they dropped their weapons. Zalira exhaled. She had won, not with force, but with something far greater. With Jeno at her side, she made her way back to the village. When she arrived, the people gathered, their faces a mixture of awe and fear. The girl they had once cast aside had returned, no longer weak, no longer powerless. She walked past them all, heading straight for the one who had tried to destroy her, her stepmother. Nefari's face twisted in shock, then fury. But beneath it, Zalira saw something else. Fear. For the first time, it was her stepmother who felt powerless. And Zalira, she was finally free. The village square was silent as Zalira stepped forward, her presence commanding in a way no one had ever seen before. She was no longer the helpless girl they had sent away. She had walked between worlds and returned, stronger than anyone could have imagined. Her stepmother, Nefari, stood frozen before the gathered villagers. Her usual air of confidence had vanished, replaced by unease. She had spent years weaving lies, ensuring Zalira remained weak and unloved. But now, those lies were unraveling before her eyes. Zalira's gaze burned into her. "You sent me away to die." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The village chief, the elders, and the people who had once ignored Zalira now listened, their eyes filled with shock. Nefari's lips pressed into a thin line. "You were chosen by the spirits. It was fate." Zalira took another step forward. The air around her shifted, carrying a whispering wind, the voices of the spirits. "No," she said, her voice resonating with something beyond herself. "It was not fate, it was your doing, and the spirits have seen everything." Suddenly, the wind howled through the square, swirling around Zalira like an unseen force. A flicker of blue light shimmered in her eyes as the spirits made themselves known. The voices spoke, not just hers, but those of the ancestors. "You, Nefari, deceived your own family. You cast away the daughter of your husband. You bribed the chief. You sent hunters to silence the one who could expose your wickedness." The villagers recoiled as the truth was laid bare before them. The elders, who had long trusted Nefari's words, now looked at her with disgust. Nefari's face paled. She had spent years manipulating the village, but now there was no escape. "No, it's not true! They lie!" she shrieked. But no one listened. The village chief, now realizing his mistake in ever trusting her, stepped forward. "The spirits have spoken." His voice was heavy with finality. "You are no longer welcome here." The elders murmured in agreement, and soon the crowd erupted, some shouting their anger, others turning away in disappointment. Nefari fell to her knees, her hands trembling. She had lost everything. Two warriors stepped forward, ready to escort her out of the village. She would be cast into exile, left to wander alone, without power, without family. As they took her away, Zalira remained still, watching as the woman who had tormented her disappeared beyond the village gates. She felt no hatred, only a strange sense of peace. Then the chief turned to Zalira. "You have returned not just as a survivor, but as a protector of this village." The people murmured in agreement, their eyes filled with newfound respect. One of the elders stepped forward, holding out a sacred cloth, a sign of honor and leadership. "Zalira," the elder said, bowing her head, "you are no longer a forgotten girl. You are now a woman of power." The villagers knelt before her. Zalira closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her journey, the loss, the pain, but also the strength she had gained. She had reclaimed her place, not as a victim, but as a legend. The village was still and quiet beneath the moon's soft glow. The night carried a strange peace, one that felt like both an ending and a beginning. Zalira stood with Jeno at the edge of the sacred grove, where the veil between worlds shimmered like mist. He was free now, his body no longer flickering between life and death, his eyes no longer haunted by sorrow. But even as he stood whole before her, she could feel it in her heart. He did not belong to this world anymore. Jeno reached for her hand, his warmth steady and real. "Zalira," he murmured, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 stories. "You have done what no one else could. Because of you, I am no longer bound by the curse." Her throat tightened. "Then stay," she whispered. "Stay and live." A sad smile touched his lips. "I cannot. My place is with the spirits now." He lifted his gaze toward the village in the distance. "But I will not leave you entirely. I will watch over the people, over you. I will guard this land as its protector, just as you have become its leader." Zalira's heart ached. She had fought so hard, risked everything to bring him back, only to lose him again. "I don't want to say goodbye," she admitted. Jeno lifted a hand and gently cupped her face. then don't. His eyes gleamed, full of something eternal. This is not the end. One day, in another life, we will find each other again. Tears welled in her eyes, but she did not let them fall. She was no longer the girl who had been cast away. She was strong enough to bear even this pain. Jeno stepped back, his form beginning to glow with the soft golden light of the spirit realm. The winds carried his presence upward, his body fading into the energy of the world itself. Before he vanished completely, his voice reached her one last time. "You are my greatest love, Zalira, and love like ours never ends." Then he was gone. Zalira stood there for a long time, staring at the place where he had been. She did not cry. She did not fall to grief. Instead, she closed her eyes, pressed a hand to her heart, and whispered to the wind, "Until we meet again." Far beyond the village, beneath the endless sky, the spirits whispered back. Since Zalira's return, the land had begun to heal. The once dry river now flowed with fresh, clear water. The crops, which had withered under the weight of the curse, stood tall and green. The air, once heavy with fear, now carried the laughter of children and the songs of farmers. But more than the land, it was the people who had changed. They no longer lived in fear of the spirits. They no longer sought to appease them with blind offerings. Instead, they honored them with gratitude and respect, knowing now that the spirits were not to be feared, but to be understood. At the heart of this transformation stood Zalira. She was no longer the forgotten girl who had been cast aside. She was now a leader, a healer, a protector. The elders, who once followed tradition without question, now sought her wisdom. The villagers, who had once ignored her, now looked to her for guidance. And the children, wide-eyed and full of wonder, gathered at her feet each evening to hear her stories, the true stories of the spirits, of love, of sacrifice, and of strength. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Zalira stood at the riverbank, watching the water ripple. She closed her eyes and listened, not just to the rustling leaves or the distant chatter of the village, but to something deeper. The spirits were still with her. She could feel Jeno's presence woven into the very air she breathed. He was not gone, not truly. He had become part of the land, the river, the wind. He was watching over them all. A soft breeze brushed against her cheek, warm and familiar. A silent promise. A love that endured beyond time. Zalira smiled. She turned back toward the village, where her people awaited her, where a new era had begun. Where she had once been nothing, she had now become everything she was meant to be. And this was only the beginning. Years passed, and the village flourished under Zalira's guidance. She had grown into a wise leader, respected by all, and the balance between the living and the spirits remained strong. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a cry of new life echoed through the village. A child had been born, a boy with dark, piercing eyes that seemed ancient, as if they had seen lifetimes before this one. Whispers spread quickly among the people. The child's mother, a kind-hearted woman who had once been one of Zalira's closest followers, brought the newborn to her. "Look at him," she said softly. "There is something different about him." Zalira knelt and gazed into the baby's eyes. A shiver ran through her. Those eyes, they were Jeno's. A deep knowing settled in her heart. It was him. The spirits had given him a second life, bringing him back not as a ghost, not as a fleeting whisper on the wind, but as flesh and blood, a child of the village, born anew. Tears welled in Zalira's eyes, not of sadness, but of awe. She had believed in fate, in the will of the spirits, but she had never expected this. The baby cooed, his tiny hand reaching toward her. As she took it, a familiar warmth filled her, the same warmth she had felt whenever Jeno was near. The villagers, sensing something sacred, fell silent. They did not need to hear the words to understand. This child was special. He carried the soul of the warrior who had once protected them, the man who had loved Zalira beyond death itself. She smiled, pressing a gentle kiss to the baby's forehead. Welcome back, old friend. The wind stirred around them, rustling the trees, carrying with it a whisper from the spirits. Love never dies. Destiny always finds a way. And so, the cycle continued.